The city lights always felt like a warm embrace when I was with Marcus. Our small, perfectly lived-in apartment on the 7th floor, overlooking the bustling streets of Meridian Heights, was our sanctuary. It smelled of his morning coffee and the lavender linen spray I insisted on. Every evening, he'd come home, shed his designer blazer on the entryway chair, a habit I'd gently nag him about but secretly found endearing, and pull me into a hug that felt like coming home. We'd cook, sometimes elaborate dishes from a cookbook I'd bought, sometimes just take out on the floor, sharing stories from our day. He was a software engineer, brilliant and driven, with a laugh that could make me forget every worry. I was a content strategist, weaving narratives for brands, and Marcus was the one story I never tired of. We'd been together for 3 blissful years, a comfortable rhythm settling into our lives. Our weekends were a ritual: Saturday morning market trips, lazy brunches, and then evenings spent curled on the sofa, debating indie films or planning hypothetical trips to places we swore we'd see together. Venice, Kyoto, a tiny cottage in the Scottish Highlands. Our travel board was a collage of dreams, each destination a promise whispered between us. He talked about our future with such certainty, such vivid detail, that I could practically see it: a bigger apartment, maybe a loft with more light, a dog, a golden retriever named Atlas, of course, and then, eventually, children. He'd sketch out floor plans on napkins at diners, pointing out where the nursery would go, where his home office for late-night coding sessions would be. His ambition was infectious. He wanted to start his own tech venture, something revolutionary in AI, and I was his fiercest cheerleader. I'd spend hours listening to his ideas, offering marketing insights, believing wholly in his vision. He'd call me his muse, his rock, his sounding board. And I believed it. Every word. He had this way of making me feel like the most important person in the world, like my opinions mattered more than anyone else's, like my comfort was his priority. He'd remember the tiniest details I'd mention in passing: a favorite obscure author, a childhood memory, a silly fear, and bring them up weeks later, weaving them into inside jokes or thoughtful gestures. Once, I mentioned a fleeting wish for a rare first edition of a poetry book, and 2 months later, on my birthday, there it was, carefully wrapped, tucked into a hand-carved wooden box. It wasn't just the gift, it was the meticulous attention, the patient listening that made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life. Our friends envied our relationship, often commenting on how effortlessly we seemed to fit. We were the couple that everyone said just worked, the kind you looked at and thought, yep, they're in it for the long haul. I allowed myself to fully lean into that belief, to let down all my guards. This was it, I thought. This was my forever. And the thought filled me with a quiet, profound joy that radiated through every cell of my being. He was my anchor, my compass, the calm in every storm. Or so I believed. The first ripple in our placid waters was almost imperceptible, a fleeting shadow quickly dismissed. Marcus had started spending more time in his home office, the door often closed, the faint hum of his server racks a constant backdrop to our evenings. He'd explain it away with crunch time for his startup, a big investor demo looming. I understood. Ambition, sacrifice, it was all part of the journey to our shared future, right? But the little things began to accumulate. A slight impatience in his tone when I asked about his day, a dismissive wave of his hand when I suggested a walk in the park. He'd scroll through his phone even during dinner, muttering about urgent emails or critical updates. I'd tell myself it was the pressure, the weight of his dreams. He was building something grand, and grand things required grand effort. So I gave him space. I cooked his favorite meals, brought him coffee while he coded, and learned to entertain myself quietly in the living room. Surrounded by the silence his closed office door created. He'd sometimes emerge, looking tired but triumphant, and pull me into a quick, grateful hug, apologizing for being distant. And with that hug, all my nascent worries would dissolve. He still loved me. He was just busy. Then came the family dinner, His parents, wealthy and impeccably dressed, lived in a sprawling estate on the other side of the city. I always felt a little out of place there, my comfortable jeans and oversized sweaters clashing with their polished veneer. His mother, Eleanor, a woman with eyes that seemed to constantly appraise, would make subtle comments about my hair being a bit wild, or my career choice being creative, but perhaps not as stable as Marcus's. Marcus would always step in, gently, smoothly defending me with a loving smile. But this time, something felt different. Eleanor was talking about Marcus's potential, about how he needed to focus on people who truly understood his vision, glancing pointedly at me. Marcus just nodded, a non-committal hum escaping his lips. He didn't meet my eyes. Later, in the car, I brought it up, my voice a little shaky. "Your mom seemed a bit pointed tonight." He shrugged, keeping his gaze fixed on the road. "She's just looking out for me, Elle. You know how ambitious she is for my career. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." The words echoed in my head, a chill spreading through me. It wasn't just his mother, it was his lack of defense, his almost imperceptible withdrawal. It was the first time I felt truly alone, sitting next to him, in the comfort of our shared car, driving back to our shared home. The unease wasn't fleeting anymore, it was a persistent whisper, a discordant note in our otherwise perfect symphony. But I pushed it down. I had to. Because acknowledging it meant acknowledging that the foundation, the very bedrock of our perfect life, might have a crack. And that thought was simply too terrifying to entertain. I was still so deeply in love, so committed to the narrative we had built together, that I allowed the seeds of doubt to wither under the scorching sun of my own denial. It was easier to believe I was overthinking, that my insecurities were playing tricks on me, than to admit that the man I adored might be changing, or worse, that he might not be who I thought he was all along. The big idea arrived with a flourish, a PowerPoint presentation worthy of a venture capital pitch. Marcus called it Synthetica, an AI-driven platform that would revolutionize data analytics, making complex algorithms accessible to small businesses. His eyes gleamed with passion as he spoke, his hands gesticulating wildly, the same charming enthusiasm that had swept me off my feet years ago. "This isn't just a project, Elle," he'd said, pulling me onto his lap, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "This is our legacy. This is what we've been working towards." The initial funding round had been challenging, he admitted, but he'd secured a few angel investors. What he needed now, he explained, was a significant personal investment to show commitment and to bridge the gap until the next, larger funding round. My savings. All of it. The down payment I'd been meticulously building for a loft, the emergency fund I'd squirreled away since my first real job. It was substantial. My heart pounded, a mix of terror and exhilarating belief. This was it. Our leap of faith. Our grand adventure. He explained the projections, the rapid growth, the imminent returns. He painted a future where we were not just comfortable, but truly free, living lives of purpose and abundance, all thanks to Synthetica. I didn't hesitate. Not truly. A tiny voice of caution tried to surface, a whisper about diversifying, about having a safety net. But Marcus had an answer for everything, a reassuring smile, a logical explanation that smoothed away every doubt. "We're a team, Elle," he'd insisted, holding my hands, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't just my dream, it's ours. And we tackle our dreams together." The words resonated deep within me. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about partnership. About building a future hand in hand. I emptied my accounts. Every penny. I even pulled from a small inheritance I'd received from my grandmother, a sum I'd always envisioned using for something stable, something secure. But this, Marcus argued, was stable. This was secure. This was future-proof. He set up the legal documents, all very official looking, outlining my investment as a loan, convertible into equity at a later date. He assured me it was merely a formality, a legal structure. "It's just paper, Elle," he'd laughed, "the real investment is our trust in each other." My signature felt monumental, a physical representation of my complete faith in him, in us. He celebrated that night, ordering the most expensive champagne, toasting to our future, to Synthetica, to our unwavering partnership. I felt a surge of pride, of purpose. I wasn't just his girlfriend, I was his partner, his co-founder in life and in dreams. And as I watched him, radiating confidence and charm, I truly believed we were on the cusp of something extraordinary. The sacrifice felt trivial compared to the immense promise of what lay ahead. This was our future, wasn't it? A future built on shared dreams, shared risks, and shared triumphs. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly part of something bigger than myself, something that would define our lives for decades to come. The initial euphoria of Synthetica began to fade, replaced by a dull, persistent ache of anxiety. Marcus's crunch time never seemed to end. He was always on calls, always at investor meetings, always needing just a little more time before the big launch. My days became a monotonous cycle of work, followed by silent evenings in an apartment that felt increasingly empty, even with him physically present. He barely ate the meals I cooked, opting for late-night takeout in his office. Our weekend rituals vanished, replaced by his frantic energy, his phone constantly buzzing. When I asked about the platform's progress, he'd give vague, technical answers I couldn't quite grasp, or snap at me for distracting him. "You wouldn't understand, Elle, it's highly complex. Just trust me on this." My own financial situation became precarious. My savings were gone. I was living paycheck to paycheck, something I hadn't done since my first year out of college. I found myself anxiously checking my bank balance, calculating every expense. He'd promised the returns would start flowing in within 6 months, then 8, then a year. Each new delay came with a new, elaborate explanation, a new technical hurdle, a new investor complication. I'd try to bring it up, gently, asking if we needed to adjust our spending, or if he had a timeline for when I'd see some of my investment back. He'd get defensive, his charming smile replaced by a tight-lipped frown. "Are you doubting me, Elena? After everything? Do you really think I'd jeopardize our future?" The guilt would wash over me, swift and potent. How could I doubt him? He was working so hard. I was being selfish. My gut was screaming, a primal alarm blaring in my subconscious, but my heart refused to listen, suffocating the sound with layers of devotion and a desperate need to believe. Chloe, my best friend since university, saw it. She'd always had a sharper eye, a less clouded judgment than mine. Over weekly coffee dates, she'd listen patiently as I recounted Marcus's latest excuse, my voice trailing off into a sigh. "Elle, are you sure he's being honest with you about all this?" she'd ask, her brow furrowed with concern. "It just sounds off. A real startup needs more than one round of personal investment from a girlfriend." I'd brush her off, defensive. "You don't understand, Chloe. He's brilliant. This is going to be huge." But her words, like tiny cracks in a dam, started to let in the cold reality. One evening, after Marcus had been particularly dismissive, barely acknowledging my presence for hours, I found myself crying silently into my pillow. It wasn't just the money, it was the emotional distance, the chilling sense of being alone in a relationship I thought was everything. I missed the old Marcus, the one who'd laugh with me, plan with me, see me. This new Marcus, consumed by his vision, felt like a stranger. The apartment, once a haven, now felt like a gilded cage. Every item I owned felt connected to him, to his dreams, to the investment I'd made in him. It was a suffocating realization. I was financially tethered, emotionally starved, and utterly bewildered. And the terrifying thought was creeping in, what if my gut was right? What if this wasn't just stress, but something far more insidious? What if I was losing not just my savings, but my sense of self, piece by agonizing piece, under the slow, steady erosion of his ambition? I decided to make it special. Our 4th anniversary was approaching, and despite the recent distance, I wanted to reignite the spark, to remind us of the love that had once burned so brightly. I had a grand plan, a surprise dinner at the Stellar Bloom, an exclusive rooftop restaurant Marcus had always wanted to try. It was impossibly difficult to get a reservation, but I'd pulled every string, called in every favor. I'd booked the private dining alcove, adorned with fairy lights and panoramic city views, specifically for us. And I had another surprise. A life-altering one. For weeks, I'd been feeling different. Tired, nauseous, a subtle but persistent flutter in my chest that wasn't anxiety. I'd taken the test that morning. 2 lines. Faint, but undeniably there. I was pregnant. Our baby. Marcus's baby. I imagined his face, the joy, the shock, the tender way he'd hold me. This was it. This was the news that would bring him back to me, bring us back to us. It would solidify our future, intertwine our lives in an unbreakable bond. I bought a tiny pair of baby booties, softest cashmere, and tucked them into a small, velvet box. I planned to give them to him just after the dessert, under the glow of the city lights, with the soft jazz playing in the background. The excitement was almost unbearable. I hadn't told Chloe, wanting this moment to be entirely ours. Marcus had been unusually quiet that day, a little preoccupied. He'd been on his phone more than usual, even for him, and seemed distracted when I'd tried to talk about my plans for the evening. He'd merely nodded, a vague smile on his face, muttering something about being swamped, but looking forward to celebrating. I put it down to his stress, his startup. He was probably just trying to clear his mind for our special night. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a dress he loved, doing my hair and makeup with meticulous care. I wanted to look radiant for him, for us, for this new chapter. My heart swelled with hope, with love, with the incredible secret I was carrying. This was going to change everything. This was the beginning of our real, true family. I rehearsed the words in my head, the tender way I'd tell him, the quiet awe with which we'd both embrace the news. I imagined his arm around me, his hand resting protectively on my not showing belly. I walked into the Stellar Bloom, my palms sweating, a nervous but joyful flutter in my stomach. The maitre d' led me to our alcove. Marcus was already there, impeccably dressed, facing the city lights. He turned, and for a split second, I saw something in his eyes, something cold and unreadable, before his usual charming smile snapped into place. I was about to tell him everything, about our everything, but before I could utter a single word, he took a deep breath, and with a detached calm that curdled my blood, he began to speak. The air shimmered with anticipation, with the fragile hope that I had built around this evening, unaware that it was about to be utterly, irrevocably shattered. The words Marcus spoke were like perfectly aimed darts, each one piercing a different part of my soul. Elena, he started, his voice unnervingly even, a stark contrast to the thumping chaos in my chest. I think we need to talk. About us. My smile faltered. My hand instinctively went to the velvet box in my purse, the one holding the tiny cashmere booties. Talk? On our anniversary? In this beautiful setting? A knot of dread began to tighten in my stomach. What about us, Marcus? I managed, my voice a whisper. He sighed, a dramatic, weary sound, as if he were burdened by some immense weight. Look, Elle, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About my future. About Synthetica. And I've realized, this isn't working. He gestured vaguely between us. You're wonderful, truly. But you're not, aligned with my vision. You don't understand the demands of this life. My jaw dropped. My carefully constructed world began to tilt. Not aligned? Marcus, I invested everything. My savings, my grandmother's inheritance, my entire future into your vision. My voice rose, a tremor of disbelief running through it. I thought we were building this together. He actually laughed. A short, bitter sound devoid of warmth. Oh, Elena. You really think that investment was for us? That was a business decision. A calculated risk. You should have read the fine print. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but with a cutting edge that sliced through the romantic ambience of the restaurant. Honestly, you're just not sophisticated enough for where I'm going. You're holding me back. My investors, my future wife, they need someone who truly gets it. Future wife? The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp. I stared at him, my mind scrambling to process the casual cruelty of his words. Just then, a woman, tall and sleek in a shimmering emerald dress, walked up to our table. She had sharp, intelligent eyes, and a predatory smile. She slipped her hand into Marcus's, possessively. Ready to go, darling, she purred, her gaze raking over me with a dismissive sneer. Marcus turned to her, his face softening into the familiar, charming smile I thought was reserved for me. Ready, Serena. Just finishing up here. The world shattered, and everyone was watching. Not just the couple at the next table, who averted their eyes awkwardly, but the waiters, the maitre d', the silent city outside. The fairy lights suddenly seemed to mock me, their twinkle highlighting the humiliation etched on my face. My hand trembled, dropping the small velvet box from my purse. The baby booties spilled out onto the pristine white tablecloth, stark against the elegant setting. Marcus's eyes flickered to them, and for a microsecond, a flicker of something, surprise? Guilt? Crossed his face. But it was gone instantly, replaced by a cold indifference. Serena saw them too. Her thin eyebrows rose. Oh, how quaint, she drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Souvenirs? Marcus quickly scooped them up, shoving them back into the box and then into my bag. Just an old memento, he said smoothly to Serena, then turned to me, his voice a chilling monotone. I think you should leave, Elena. We have nothing more to discuss. He stood up, pulling Serena with him, turning his back on me without another glance, walking out of the restaurant as if I were a piece of forgotten luggage, leaving me alone in the private alcove, the symbol of our broken future scattered on the table. The silence after they left was deafening, amplified by the jazz music that now felt like a funeral dirge. My head spun. The baby. My baby. Our baby. He hadn't even asked. He hadn't even cared. He had simply discarded me, and the future I carried within me, with the same cold detachment he might show a faulty line of code. The humiliation burned hotter than any fury. It wasn't just a breakup, it was an annihilation. And as the tears finally came, hot and stinging, I knew one thing with chilling certainty: the man I loved was a ghost, a carefully constructed illusion. And the real Marcus was a stranger, a monster, who had just set fire to everything I held dear. I barely remembered getting home, just the blurring lights of the city through my tear-streaked vision. The apartment, once our sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. I stumbled through the door, my dress still on, and collapsed onto the sofa, the velvet box of baby booties clutched in my hand. The quiet was oppressive, punctuated only by my ragged breaths and the frantic thumping of my heart. My phone buzzed, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. It was probably Chloe, worried sick. She had tried to call me before, after I texted her the restaurant name. Excited about the surprise. Now, I knew she'd be calling out of concern. The initial shock gave way to a crushing emptiness. It wasn't just the betrayal, the public humiliation, or even the devastating news about the baby I was carrying. It was the complete obliteration of my reality. Every shared laugh, every whispered promise, every intimate moment, were they all lies? Was I a fool? The thought was a relentless tormentor. I felt a cold, deep rage begin to simmer beneath the surface of my grief. This wasn't just about a broken heart, it was about my shattered dignity, my financial ruin, and the future of an innocent life I was now solely responsible for. The exhaustion was overwhelming, a heavy blanket that threatened to suffocate me. I curled into a ball, the world outside ceasing to exist. Hours bled into each other. I didn't eat, didn't sleep. The apartment was a monument to his lies, every object a painful reminder. His coffee mug on the counter, the lavender linen spray by the bed, even his half-empty protein powder container in the pantry. Each one was a tiny shard of glass, twisting in the open wound. As the raw pain began to dull into a throbbing ache, a new sensation emerged: clarity. In the distorted haze of my memories, strange fragments began to surface, moments I'd dismissed, rationalized, or simply ignored. His sudden, unexplained trips out of town, always business. His quick temper when I looked at his phone or asked too many questions about Synthetica. The way he'd subtly belittle my career, my friends, my interests, making me feel like I needed to be more to be worthy of him. The constant gaslighting, the insidious whispers that my intuition was wrong, that I was the one being sensitive, insecure, or overly emotional. He'd always say, "You're imagining things, Elle. Why would I lie to you? You're the only one for me." And I had always believed him, turning the blame inward. Now, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. He had been meticulously isolating me, chipping away at my self-worth, making me dependent on his validation. He had been weaving a web of lies so intricate, so convincing, that I had walked into it willingly, even eagerly. I remembered the time he'd lost an important document I'd left for him to sign, the one specifying the convertible loan terms for my investment. He'd blamed me, saying I must have misplaced it, making me search frantically for hours. I eventually found a different, much less favorable version hidden in his desk drawer, but he'd brushed it off as an old draft. I remembered Eleanor's pointed comments at family dinners, her dismissive glances. Was she in on it? Did they all know? The thought made my stomach churn. The more I replayed these moments, the more the pattern emerged, a calculated, cruel deception designed to extract everything he could from me, financially and emotionally. The realization wasn't just painful, it was a profound violation. My trust hadn't just been broken, it had been weaponized. And as the sun began to filter through the blinds, casting long shadows across the living room, I knew one thing with a chilling certainty: I wouldn't just survive this. I would fight back. Not for revenge, not truly, but for my dignity, for my future, and for the tiny, innocent life now entwined with mine. The ringing silence in the apartment now felt like a promise, a quiet vow to uncover every lie, expose every deceit, and reclaim what was stolen. The first day after the public annihilation at the Stellar Bloom was a blur of tears and raw, visceral pain. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even bring myself to change out of the dress I'd worn, now a crumpled testament to my shattered dreams. My phone, which had been buzzing incessantly, finally died. I just lay on the sofa, clutching the tiny cashmere booties, the fabric rough against my tear-soaked cheeks. The apartment, once filled with the echoes of our laughter and shared plans, was now a hollow chamber, each silence a reminder of his absence, his betrayal. I barely moved, paralyzed by the enormity of what had happened, by the utter devastation of realizing the man I loved was a carefully constructed fiction. But then, as the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a cold, simmering anger, a different emotion flickered to life: defiance. It started small, a stubborn spark refusing to be extinguished. He wouldn't get away with this. Not truly. He wouldn't leave me broken, humiliated, and financially ruined. And he certainly wouldn't walk away from the life growing inside me, a life he had so casually dismissed. The thought of him celebrating with Serena, probably mocking my naivety, fueled a sudden, fierce resolve. I hauled myself off the sofa, my muscles aching, and found my phone charger. As it powered on, a flood of messages and missed calls poured in. Most were from Chloe. She'd been trying to reach me for hours. A few were from mutual friends, tentative and worried. I opened Chloe's texts first. "Elena, are you okay? What happened at the restaurant? I saw Marcus leave with someone else. Call me, please." I called her, my voice hoarse from crying, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain, anger, and disbelief. I told her everything: his cruel words, Serena's presence, the baby booties falling out, his callous dismissal of me and, implicitly, of our child. Chloe listened, her silence punctuated by soft gasps of outrage. "Oh, Elle," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "That bastard. That absolute, manipulative bastard." Her unwavering support was a lifeline. "You know what?" she said, her voice hardening. "We're not letting him get away with this. Not a chance. We're going to find out everything." And that was the turning point. Chloe's fierce loyalty ignited a spark of hope, a flicker of empowerment I desperately needed. We spent the rest of the night, and the entire next day, in a whirlwind of emotional support and nascent detective work. Chloe brought over emergency supplies, strong coffee, comfort food, and her laptop. We sat side by side, poring over old photos, his social media, anything that might give us a clue. My initial focus was on Serena. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Marcus's social media was meticulously curated, full of bland corporate updates and aspirational quotes. No hints of Serena. But Chloe, with her sharp instincts and digital sleuthing skills, found her, Serena Vance, a senior associate at a prominent venture capital firm, the very firm Marcus had supposedly been pitching for months. Her profile was public, and there, amidst photos of sleek business conferences and lavish parties, were several subtle clues: a blurry figure in the background of a group photo that looked suspiciously like Marcus, a shared location tag from a business trip Marcus had taken, a comment on one of her posts about a brilliant new pitch that aligned with the timeline of his Synthetica updates. The casualness of their public interaction, yet the clear intimacy I'd witnessed, screamed calculated deception. The initial discoveries were small, almost negligible in isolation, but together, they formed a chilling mosaic. We started with his phone records, something I'd never dared to look at before, believing in his inherent honesty. Now, fueled by righteous anger, I had no such qualms. His call logs showed frequent, unlisted numbers, and his texts, when I managed to quickly scroll through his open messages while he was in the shower the morning after the breakup when he briefly returned to collect his things, which felt like another calculated insult, were full of coded language, evasive promises, and mentions of the deal that didn't sound like Synthetica. Chloe suggested we start systematically. "We need to build a timeline, Elle. Every business trip, every late night, every time he dismissed you. We'll cross-reference it with his social media, Serena's social media, and anything else we can find." The sheer audacity of his lies, the meticulous way he had crafted this alternate reality, fueled my determination. I felt a strange mix of nauseating dread and exhilarating resolve. This wasn't just about uncovering his betrayal, it was about reclaiming my own truth, piece by agonizing piece. And as Chloe brewed another pot of coffee, her eyes fierce with protective loyalty, I knew that the investigation had only just begun. The pain was still there, a constant companion, but now, it was a pain sharpened by purpose, a pain that demanded answers. The more we dug, the more the ground beneath me crumbled. The initial findings were just the tip of a colossal, icy iceberg. The financial deception was far more elaborate than I could have imagined. I started by contacting my bank, requesting detailed statements for the past 2 years, specifically concerning the transfers to Marcus's Synthetica account. The paper trail was damning. My substantial investment had been moved, not into a company account, but into a personal account under his name, then almost immediately siphoned off into various other accounts. Some were marked consulting fees to obscure entities, others simply disappeared into a network of transfers I couldn't trace without more information. He hadn't invested my money in Synthetica at all, he'd simply taken it. The legal documents he'd had me sign, outlining the convertible loan, were, as Chloe helped me realize after a quick online search, riddled with loopholes and obscure clauses designed to protect him, not me. It wasn't a legitimate investment agreement, it was a carefully crafted trap. The legal jargon, which he'd breezed past, calling it standard boilerplate, was anything but. The Synthetica itself? A phantom. There was no public website, no verifiable company registration in his name, no listed employees other than himself. We checked every startup database, every tech registry. Nothing. The elaborate PowerPoint, the detailed projections, the big investor demos, all of it was a charade. He had been performing, putting on a meticulous show for my benefit, to extract my savings. Each new piece of information was like a fresh stab wound, not just to my heart, but to my very perception of reality. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had designed its destruction, brick by calculated brick. The emotional impact was overwhelming. It wasn't just losing my money, it was losing my trust in humanity, in love, in everything I thought was real. I felt a physical sickness, a cold wave of nausea that churned in my stomach. Then came the discovery of the other secret relationship. Not just Serena, the future wife. There was another one. A woman named Lydia, whose Instagram account was private, but whose Facebook profile revealed a series of photos with Marcus dating back over 2 years, well into our relationship. He was kissing her cheek in a park, laughing with her at a Christmas market, holding her hand at a beach. These weren't just casual encounters, they were deeply intimate, romantic moments, captured for the world to see, except for the world I inhabited. He had told me he was visiting his sick aunt on those weekends, or attending a tech conference. The lies piled higher and higher, a towering monument to his duplicity. He was living a double, possibly triple, life, orchestrating elaborate narratives for each woman, for each segment of his life. The sheer scale of his manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. It wasn't just deceit, it was psychological warfare. He wasn't just a liar, he was a con artist, a master manipulator, who derived a sick pleasure from controlling and exploiting those who loved and trusted him. The discovery of Lydia brought a fresh wave of grief, but also a chilling understanding. He wasn't just betraying me, this was his pattern. He had perfected the art of emotional and financial exploitation. My rage hardened into something cold and precise. It wasn't about tears anymore. It was about justice. It was about exposing the true face of the man who had stolen my future and nearly obliterated my past. And with each new revelation, the image of the charming, loving Marcus I had built in my mind disintegrated, revealing the hollow, calculating shell beneath. The full extent of Marcus's calculated deception finally clicked into place, a horrifyingly complete picture painted with my shattered trust and stolen future. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had engineered its destruction, meticulously, patiently, over years. The Synthetica project wasn't just fake, it was a smokescreen. A sophisticated narrative spun to extract my life savings. I uncovered evidence that he was actually working as a low-level data analyst for a struggling tech firm, not the visionary entrepreneur he claimed to be. His investor meetings were often just long lunches with colleagues, or even dates with Serena. Serena Vance wasn't just his new girlfriend, she was the daughter of a prominent venture capitalist whose firm he desperately wanted to impress and, likely, leverage for his own career advancement. He wasn't building a company, he was building a facade, using me, my money, and my unwavering belief as building blocks for his own selfish ambitions. He had planned this, every step of the way, knowing exactly what he was doing. Chloe and I found a hidden folder on an old shared cloud drive, disguised as tax documents, which contained meticulously detailed notes. These weren't just jottings, they were a cruel chronicle of his machinations. Dates of business trips cross-referenced with photos of him with Lydia. Notes on how to handle my questions about the investment. Even a chilling entry about how to manage my emotions, detailing my vulnerable points, my insecurities, and how to use them against me. He had analyzed me, the woman who loved him unconditionally, and dissected my emotional landscape to better manipulate me. There was an entry, dated just a few weeks before the anniversary dinner, that read, "Elena will be easy. She's too invested. The baby reveal will be the perfect moment for the clean break. Public, dramatic, ensures she won't fight back on the money. Too humiliated." The words were like ice in my veins. He knew. He had anticipated my pregnancy, or at least the likelihood of some significant personal news, and planned to use it as the ultimate weapon of public humiliation. He hadn't just used me, he had studied me, catalogued my weaknesses, and then systematically dismantled me. The future wife comment at the restaurant? It wasn't a casual remark. He and Serena were engaged. Their engagement announcement, discreetly posted on Serena's private LinkedIn profile, which Chloe managed to access through a mutual connection, was dated a week before our anniversary. He was already planning his marriage while still leading me on, still taking my money, still pretending we had a future. He hadn't just been juggling two women, he was engaged to one, exploiting another, and meticulously planning the public execution of the third. The scale of his sociopathy was staggering. He wasn't just selfish, he was pathological. Every charming smile, every tender touch, every reassuring word, all of it was a performance, a grotesque play designed to achieve his sordid ends. The revelation wasn't just a heartbreak, it was an existential crisis. The man I had shared my life with, my dreams with, the man who was the father of my unborn child, was a cold, calculating monster. And I had been blind. Not just blind, but willingly, enthusiastically complicit in my own undoing. But with the horror came a profound, chilling clarity. The naive, trusting Elena was gone. In her place stood someone new, forged in the fires of betrayal. My anger solidified into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't about crying anymore. This wasn't about bitterness. This was about justice. Not just for me, but for every woman he had undoubtedly deceived, and for the innocent life I carried. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had designed its destruction, brick by brick, lie by lie. And now, I would design his. I would expose him. I would reclaim my name, my story, and my future. The pain remained, a constant echo, but it was now a pain that propelled me forward, a pain that fueled my resolve. The tears were replaced by a steely gaze, a quiet determination that promised a reckoning. He would pay. Not with money, not primarily. He would pay with his carefully constructed reputation, his public image, and the carefully crafted narrative of his own success. The plan for justice began with a quiet, methodical intensity. It wasn't about revenge, not in the petty sense of inflicting pain. It was about exposure, about truth, about reclaiming my narrative and ensuring he couldn't do this to anyone else. And it was about protecting the tiny, vulnerable life growing inside me, a life that deserved a future unburdened by his lies. Chloe was my co-conspirator, my strategic advisor, and my emotional rock. We spent countless late nights, fueled by cold pizza and stronger coffee, mapping out every step. This isn't about getting your money back right now, Chloe wisely advised. That's a separate legal battle. This is about his reputation. His image. That's what he values most. And she was right. He thrived on the perception of success, integrity, and brilliance. That was his Achilles heel. Our primary weapon, social media. It was his playground, his stage. And it would be his downfall. We meticulously gathered all the evidence, the bank statements proving the siphoning of funds, the doctored synthetic documents, the damning notes from his hidden cloud drive, the screenshots of him with Lydia, and most importantly, the confirmation of his engagement to Serena, dated before our anniversary. We built a concise, irrefutable timeline. The narrative would be simple, stark, and utterly devastating. Marcus Thorne, the visionary tech entrepreneur, was a fraud, a serial manipulator, and a two-timing fiancé who had systematically drained his naive girlfriend's life savings under the guise of a fake startup. The emotional pacing was crucial. We wouldn't unleash everything at once. We'd start with a ripple, then a wave, then a tsunami. The first phase involved subtle leaks. Anonymous tips to a few obscure tech blogs, hinting at irregularities in Marcus Thorne's startup funding. Just enough to plant seeds of doubt. The goal wasn't immediate exposure, but to create a low-level buzz of suspicion. While that simmered, I started crafting my own narrative. Not a victim's lament, but a statement of truth, carefully worded, emotionally resonant, but factually bulletproof. I outlined my journey, from hopeful partner to unsuspecting target, detailing the financial and emotional manipulation without devolving into a bitter rant. I focused on the facts, the timelines, the evidence. I also considered therapy. I needed professional help to process the trauma, to rebuild my self-worth, and to stay mentally strong for the battle ahead, and for my baby. I found a wonderful therapist who specialized in narcissistic abuse, and her insights were invaluable. She helped me understand the insidious nature of Marcus's tactics, validating my feelings and giving me tools to detach emotionally from his toxic influence. This wasn't about getting him back, it was about getting me back. Reclaiming my story, my power, my voice. I felt a surge of strength I hadn't known I possessed. The girl who had emptied her accounts for a man's dream, who had allowed herself to be gaslighted and belittled, was gone. In her place was a woman with a clear purpose, a steely resolve, and a powerful secret weapon, the truth. Chloe and I even brainstormed the ideal moment for the public unveiling. It needed to be impactful, during a time when Marcus would be seeking maximum exposure for himself. Perhaps a major tech conference, or even, ironically, around his engagement announcement. The thought made my lips curl into a grim smile. This wasn't just my story, it was a cautionary tale, a public service announcement. And I was ready to deliver it. I was ready to face him, to watch his carefully constructed world crumble, not with joy, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice, finally, would be served. The day of reckoning arrived with a crisp autumn chill, ironically mirroring the cold resolve that had settled deep within me. Marcus was scheduled to deliver a keynote at the annual Meridian Heights Tech Summit, an event he had meticulously cultivated his presence at for years. It was his stage, his moment to shine, and that made it the perfect moment for his carefully constructed world to implode. Chloe and I had been working on this for weeks, refining the narrative, assembling the digital evidence into a compelling, undeniable package. My statement wasn't just a text post, it was a mini documentary, a series of short, impactful videos and visual timelines designed for maximum virality across all social media platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Each video was concise, factual, and deeply personal, but without a hint of self-pity. I remember standing backstage, disguised as a freelance journalist, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Marcus was on stage, radiating his signature charm, captivating the audience with his practiced delivery about innovation and disruptive technology. He was talking about Synthetica, the ghost project, the lie that had swallowed my life savings. My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear, it was a potent mix of anticipation and righteous fury. I carried a small USB drive in my pocket, the trigger to unleash the truth. The moment came as he concluded his speech, basking in the applause. As he walked off stage, making his way through the congratulatory throng, I caught his eye. For a split second, recognition, then confusion, then a flash of annoyance crossed his face. He began to dismiss me, a hand raised to wave me away, assuming I was just another eager fan. That was my cue. I pulled out my phone, launched the pre-scheduled social media posts, and watched the first video go live. Within seconds, a torrent of notifications exploded across my screen. The first wave hit Twitter, then Instagram, then LinkedIn. My story, meticulously compiled, was out there. Then, I approached him directly, my voice steady, though my hands were clammy. "Marcus," I said, loud enough for a few nearby journalists and attendees to hear, "we need to talk about Synthetica. And your other projects." His face went ashen. The charming facade shattered, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, for a way to contain the unfolding disaster. Serena, who had been waiting for him, clutching his arm, looked at him with dawning horror as her phone, and the phones of those around her, lit up with my viral posts. "What is she talking about, Marcus?" Serena's voice was sharp, laced with suspicion. "Elena, what are you doing?" Marcus hissed, grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly tight. "Are you insane? You'll ruin everything." I pulled my arm away, my gaze unwavering, my voice rising just enough to carry. "You ruined everything, Marcus. You ruined my life. You stole my savings, you gaslight me, you lied about everything. About Synthetica, about your business trips, about Serena, about Lydia." The names hung in the air, a public accusation. People around us started murmuring, some checking their phones, their faces shifting from polite interest to shock and disgust as my story spread like wildfire. The journalists, sensing a scoop, crowded closer, their cameras flashing. "You defrauded me, Marcus," I stated, my voice ringing with clarity, each word a hammer blow. "You played me for a fool, and you left me publicly humiliated and financially devastated, even after I told you I was pregnant." The last words landed like a bomb. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Serena let out a small shriek, pulling her hand away from Marcus as if he were diseased. His face contorted, a mask of panic and denial. "She's lying. She's unstable. She's trying to sabotage me," he stammered, his voice cracking, his carefully cultivated composure completely gone. But the evidence was already circulating, undeniable, irrefutable. Photos, documents, timelines. The truth, in all its devastating detail, was out. The look on his face was priceless. Pure, unadulterated shock, followed by a raw, naked fear. His carefully constructed empire, built on lies and deception, was collapsing around him in real time, under the relentless glare of the tech world, and the vengeful light of my truth. He had sown the wind, and now, he was reaping the whirlwind. The fallout was immediate, brutal, and profoundly satisfying. My posts, meticulously crafted and backed by irrefutable evidence, went viral within hours. The internet, with its insatiable appetite for drama and justice, devoured my story. Hashtags like #MarcusThorneExposed and #Synthetica scam trended within minutes. News outlets, initially drawn by the commotion at the tech summit, picked up the story, verifying my claims with their own investigations. The headlines were scathing: tech visionary accused of fraud and deception, woman exposes fiancé's double life and financial scam. My inbox exploded with messages of support, solidarity, and shared experiences from women who had also been victims of similar manipulative partners. I wasn't alone. That validation, that collective outrage, was a powerful balm to my still healing wounds. The messages poured in, a torrent of empathy and encouragement. I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time since the betrayal. Marcus's world unraveled at lightning speed. The struggling tech firm he actually worked for issued a statement distancing themselves, announcing his immediate termination. Serena Vance, whose family was fiercely protective of their reputation, publicly broke off their engagement, issuing a terse press release stating she had been shocked and deeply disturbed by the revelations and had no prior knowledge of Mr. Thorne's fraudulent activities or personal deceptions. The venture capital firm her father headed also put out a statement, explicitly denying any affiliation with Marcus Thorne or his Synthetica project, essentially blacklisting him from the industry. His social media accounts, once platforms for his curated persona, were now cesspools of condemnation. The comments were relentless, unforgiving, a digital mob turning on the charlatan they once admired. His name became synonymous with fraud and deceit. His meticulously crafted image, the very thing he valued most, was utterly, irrevocably destroyed. The catharsis was profound, a deep exhale after years of holding my breath. It wasn't about vengeance, not anymore. It was about balance, about the universe correcting a grave injustice. I wasn't reveling in his pain, but in the quiet satisfaction of truth prevailing. Lydia, the other woman he had been stringing along, reached out to me, heartbroken and furious. We shared stories, bonding over our shared trauma, finding strength in our collective experience. She had also given him money, though a smaller amount, for a different opportunity he had pitched to her. We decided to pursue legal action together, not just for the money, but to ensure there was a legal record of his predatory behavior. The process was slow, arduous, and emotionally draining, but having Lydia by my side, and Chloe as my unwavering advocate, made it bearable. The lingering pain of the betrayal was still there, a phantom ache that would resurface in quiet moments. The pregnancy, once a source of joyful anticipation, was now fraught with complex emotions. I was excited, terrified, and determined to be the best mother I could be. I started attending support groups for single mothers, finding strength in their resilience. The process of public exposure, while necessary, also left me emotionally raw. The constant media attention, the online comments, both supportive and, occasionally, cruel, were draining. But through it all, a quiet strength was growing within me. I was no longer the naive woman who had trusted blindly. I was a survivor, a truth-teller, and a mother-to-be, ready to face the world with newfound wisdom and an unshakable sense of self. The silence that once oppressed me in the apartment now felt like a peaceful space, a place for healing, reflection, and the slow, steady hum of rebuilding. The apartment, once a constant reminder of Marcus and his elaborate lies, began to feel like my own again. I started by systematically removing everything that carried his scent, his presence. His side of the closet emptied, his books packed away, the lavender linen spray replaced with a crisp, clean scent of lemon and basil. Each item removed was a small act of defiance, a quiet reclaiming of my space, my life. I went through stages of grief, the raw anger, the aching sadness, the bewildered confusion, but each emotion was now processed with a newfound awareness, thanks to therapy. My therapist helped me understand the insidious nature of narcissistic abuse, how it erodes self-worth and creates a dependent dynamic. Recognizing his patterns, understanding that it was his pathology, not my fault, was incredibly liberating. It allowed me to separate the man I thought I loved from the manipulator he truly was. I started pursuing forgotten hobbies. I picked up my old paintbrushes, splattering canvases with vibrant colors, allowing my emotions to flow freely onto the surface. I joined a pottery class, finding a meditative calm in shaping clay with my hands. These were activities I had once loved, but had slowly abandoned as Marcus's vision consumed all my time and energy. Now, they were acts of self-care, tangible expressions of my rediscovered independence. My career, too, felt reinvigorated. No longer burdened by the silent financial drain of Marcus's supposed startup, I channeled my energy into my work, proposing new projects, taking on more challenging roles. My creativity, once stifled, flourished. I started a small online community for women who had experienced similar financial and emotional manipulation, sharing resources and fostering a space for healing and empowerment. It was incredibly rewarding, turning my pain into purpose, using my experience to help others avoid the same pitfalls. Chloe remained my unwavering pillar of strength, celebrating every small victory, listening patiently to every lingering fear. We talked for hours about healthy relationships, red flags, and the importance of self-worth. I also reconnected with other friends I had unintentionally distanced myself from during my relationship with Marcus. Their warmth, their non-judgmental support, reminded me of the rich tapestry of relationships I had outside of him. The biggest change, of course, was the baby. My body was transforming, preparing for a new life, a new chapter. The initial fear was still there, a tiny tremor in my heart, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of wonder and profound love. This tiny human, completely innocent, was a beacon of hope, a tangible representation of a future that was entirely my own. I read every parenting book I could find, attended prenatal classes, and meticulously planned for the arrival of my child. I was building a new life, brick by brick, not on borrowed dreams or false promises, but on my own strength, resilience, and unwavering love for the future. I was learning to breathe again, but this time it was my own air, clean and untainted by the lies of the past. The apartment, once a cage, was transforming into a cocoon, a safe space where I could heal, grow, and prepare for the most important role of my life. Life, as they say, goes on. But for me, it didn't just go on, it blossomed. It's been 2 years since the Stellar Bloom incident, 2 years since Marcus Thorne, the charming fraud, walked out of my life and into infamy. The court case, though long and emotionally draining, eventually concluded with a settlement in my favor, a partial recovery of my lost savings. It wasn't about the money, not entirely, but about the official validation of his deception, a legal acknowledgement of his crimes. He's now largely a pariah in the tech world, his name a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. His future wife, Serena, has moved on, presumably wiser, and Lydia and I have become unlikely but strong friends, sharing occasional meals and commiserating over the absurdity of what we endured. My daughter, Elena, is now a bright-eyed, endlessly curious toddler, her laughter filling the apartment that once felt so empty. She is my greatest teacher, reminding me every day of the profound capacity for love, joy, and resilience within me. She is the ultimate proof that out of immense darkness, something beautiful, something profoundly good, can emerge. My career is thriving. I've been promoted twice and have launched several successful campaigns. I also continue to mentor women in my online support group, watching them find their own strength and voice, healing together. I've started dating again, cautiously, with new boundaries and a heightened sense of self-preservation. The trust that was shattered has slowly, painstakingly, begun to mend. It's not blind trust anymore, but a trust born of discernment, of knowing my worth and recognizing red flags before they unfurl into full-blown disasters. The girl who loved Marcus was gone. And I didn't miss her. She was naive, trusting to a fault, too eager to see the best in others, even when the signs screamed otherwise. The woman who stands here today, who looks out at the city lights from her own apartment, no longer feels like a victim. She is a survivor, a warrior, a mother, and a woman who has learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from confronting it, processing it, and transforming it into power. My story isn't one of bitterness or regret. It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to heal, to grow, and to find light even after the most devastating betrayal. It's a story about reclaiming dignity, one painful step at a time, and about building a future, not from the ashes of the past, but from the fertile ground of self-discovery and unwavering self-love. I no longer wish for the life I thought I had with Marcus. I am too busy building the extraordinary life I have now, a life built on authenticity, resilience, and the unconditional love of my beautiful daughter. And as I tuck Elena into bed each night, kissing her soft cheek, I know that this journey, though born of heartbreak, has led me exactly where I needed to be, home, within myself.